Hi everyone, Gino Buccola here alongside David Aragona. We're going to preview the Saturday race of the day, which is the Grade 2 Joe Hernandez over at Santa Anita. They're going to be going 6.5 furlongs, the about 6.5 furlong distance downhill on that special, unique downhill turf course at Santa Anita. Opening weekend there comes as we take a look at the field for this one, David. We're recording early on still, and the morning line odds for the field have not come out yet. Just looking at this field, I'd imagine Motorious, coming off that runner-up effort in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, would probably take a lot of support in here. He was actually favored in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint back in 2023 when finishing 5th and only beaten like a length and a half that day. So at his best, he's a very good turf sprinter who has a really nice late turn of foot.
Yeah, you got to think Motorious is going to be a significant favorite in here, coming off that runner-up finish in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, just missing to that European Invader Starlust as the heavy favorite Cogburn went down to defeat that day. And Motorious has just been in great form in this division for the past couple of seasons. Doesn't run that often. This is only his 5th start of 2024, but when he does show up, it's typically with a good effort.
Yeah, so we'll meet this field inside through outside. But first, let's take a look at the Timeform US Pace Projector and see what they think. You have Central Dispatch, who's more of a lightly raced horse, stepping up in here and kind of facing tougher company for the first time against Stakes Company. Was a horse who had done most of his work on the lead, but actually missed the break last time out, had to show a different dimension in coming from off of it. I figure they're going to try to get him back towards the front end. But David, we actually have a horse coming out of some Los Alamitos 1,000-yard quarter horse races in Codell. So you usually see horses like that who are having to go so quick across town at Los Alamitos forwardly placed in races like this.
Yeah, you would think that Codell would have the speed to get to the front end here. He did close him off the pace in some sprints at Santa Anita back in 2022, but we'll see if he's got more speed now. You would think his only chance is to get forward in this race, but the others, it's kind of tough to read. Air Force Red is a horse that has shown the speed to get to the front end in a race like this on occasion, but more recently, maybe he's been used to coming from just off the pace. Central Dispatch, as you mentioned, he does have the speed to be up front, and here did win going gate to wire down the hill back in October.
Let's start with Air Force Red. He really does like this downhill turf course layout. He has 3 wins down the hill. He actually won this race back in 2022, so he's a Grade 2 winner. He is a pace factor. I kind of agree with what you're saying, though. It feels like at this point of his career, when he goes to a mile or anything longer than that, he's going to be right on the front end. They're not going to get cute with him. But I think it's 6.5 down the hill. He can sit off a little bit and have some late punch. It's not necessarily his best trip, but I could envision him here maybe sitting third and letting a couple of the horses that we just talked about go forward and maybe trying to carve in a nice trip right behind them. So Air Force Red, how do you feel about him in this spot?
Yeah, and even when you go back to that Joe Hernandez victory from 2022, he got to set an opening quarter in 22 flat that day, which is basically walking going down the hill when the fractions you typically see. So he's not a horse that necessarily has the speed to be on the lead if they really go fast up front, but I don't think he needs that trip because he's shown he's just as proficient stalking the pace, and he ran pretty well last time in the NAD behind First Piece, who's another specialist turf sprint who's in great form in Southern California. And I thought if he comes back with a similar effort to that, he should be right there at the end. Just a matter of whether he's still in that razor sharp form that he was going back a couple of seasons.
And when you start just going through the horses who he's been facing, I mean, he was in front of King of Gosford, who is going to be very live in a stakes race this week at Santa Anita. You see other horses like Cabo Spirit, who came back to win a graded stakes race after that. Johannes, who was the Breeders' Cup Turf runner-up. Lamas, who's going to be in a graded stakes race at Santa Anita on opening day. Caravel, a former Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint winner. There have been some really nice horses that he's faced over the last couple of years. Codell, as one who we looked at in the pace projector, has been in 1,000-yard quarter horse races over the last couple over at Los Alamitos. I will say, though, a lot of the connections will sometimes use those races as almost like a workout for horses who want to get a little more speed or who they want to get just some fitness into them because maybe a race that they were looking for didn't fill or there wasn't one coming up based on their schedule. So we do see horses use that as kind of a prep sometimes, David, but then going out to 6.5 furlongs and facing a really tough group like this, I just think this is a pretty classy group for a horse like Codell to deal with.
Yeah, that same switch almost worked for him back in September when he went off at a price 8-1 and was right there at the end of a 5 furlong second level allowance at Del Mar. 89 buyer tying his career best, but still, that was 5 furlongs. I do agree. The 6.5, it's a little tougher for a horse like this to see it out.
Sumpter had a stretch of being 0 for 16 before he won the Lure Stakes. And of course, I remember that one, David, because I had the runner up, me, Hermano Ramon, at a big, big price. And when a horse like that beats you, you'll never forget. But Sumpter came back last time out, faded in the Seabiscuit after setting the pace in that grade 2. I mean, he's better than that, and he's fine. Like, he wants to be more forward. Can he bounce back and get to a better performance?
Yeah, the trip was just all wrong in the Seabiscuit last time. He and another horse just ran off on the front end and opened up on the field. I know the pace doesn't look that fast when you see the raw fractions, but it completely fell apart. So I kind of forgive him for fading as badly as he did. And his prior form, it's a little inconsistent, but on his best day, he's run well enough to hang with this field. And I know he's never hit or finished in the exacta going down the hill before, but you look at his races back in last winter, the Clockers Quarter and the San Simeon, he didn't run that badly in those races against some decent competition. So I don't think he's out of this at what could be a decent price.
I'm not someone as a gambler who likes to use like templates. Everything's individual. I try to look at individual horses, individual races the same. But if there was a template for horses running down the hill at Santa Anita, it would be a horse like this who's shown that positional tactical speed going a little bit longer and then gets the cutback. And you just feel like they can run kind of hard most of the way down the hill and still have a little bit of fitness cutting back. So that generally plays well to the milers versus the horses coming out of the shorter turf sprints like the 5s and the 5.5s. Irideo is a Group 1 winner back in Argentina, but only has a few wins since coming to North America. He usually wins, though, at a big price, and he shows up with good efforts. He just doesn't have a whole lot of early speed. He has shown more positional speed, though, in his last couple of races. So he's a horse who, when I'm playing pick 4s and pick 5s, a lot of the times I'll kind of throw him in as one of those last horses because he does have big races, but I'm not sure if he's going to get the shape in here, and he will need to improve a little off that recent form.
Yeah, he does have quite a bit of randomness to him. I mean, he's run some races that put him in the mix here, especially going down the hill in the Clockers Corner when he upset that field back in January at 19-1. But it was after that, followed it up with a series of off-the-board finishes. He has achieved some better results in his last couple of starts, and kind of surprisingly going even shorter than this, because early in his career, he didn't look like a horse that would want to go shorter than 6.5 furlongs. Kind of surprising to see him as close to the pace that he was in the last race, and maybe that's a good sign for this spot. If he can sit a little bit closer, he could be in position to do something. But again, he's just a horse that's a little bit tough to rely on.
And even in that last race, it was Central Dispatch that had really all the trouble, that had to show a different trip, that had to come from way out of it and ran right by Irideo, who got the better trip in that race. Unconquerable Keen is the next one. This is a last out stakes winner who defeated Sorrento Sky, a rival in this race. But when you really dive into Unconquerable Keen, this to me is one of those horses, David, who's always been best from about 5 furlongs to 6 furlongs. And then once you get to about 6.5 furlongs, it's just a little bit farther than where you see the best races from him.
Yeah, I mean, on his best speed figures, he fits with anybody in this field, but all of those have come going shorter, as you mentioned. The 5 furlongs at Del Mar really feels like it's perfect for this horse, and we're taking a look at the trip of the last race, the Stormy Liberal, where he just couldn't have gotten a better ride from Umberto Rispoli, who saved all the ground around the far turn, was able to gradually angle out at the top of the stretch, and nailed Sorrento Sky on the wire. A good effort from him, but just wonder if he can duplicate it going this far.
The horse to beat in here is Motorious, who has won twice going down the hill, so this layout is no problem. He's going to make his second start back off a little bit of a freshening heading into the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, and that effort in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint was very, very good. He was about 4 lengths off early on, and then he kind of moved back a little bit, 5 or 6 lengths off, got pushed back, but he stayed inside, and he angled out in between horses right about here. You can see him get the split. It was a really good effort from him, David, finishing second against some of the best turf sprinters.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's always 2020, but maybe he would have won this race if he had stayed in that hole that he gave up to Starlust, who was able to come through without altering course the way that Motorious did, ends up just losing to that long shot by a neck, but still a good effort from him. The race did kind of fall apart when Cogburn went a little too fast on the front end. But still, this horse ran well, as he seems to quite often. I mean, he had those 2 races where he kind of went off form earlier this year, but he's since come back around. He ran just nothing but excellent races in 2023. And as you said, even though he's run well going shorter recently, he ran some big races going 6.5 earlier in his career. So I think this distance is no problem.
Central Dispatch is the number 7 in here. He's lightly raced. He's won 3 of his last 4 races, and he's 2 for 2 on the turf. And on November the 16th, he missed the break. He had a slow start. He was 5th in a small field. He was about 4 or 5 lengths off, but it actually ended up working out for him. He ended up getting a pretty nice trip because they were stacked up 2 by 2 in front of him, and he tipped out at the top of the lane and was able to kind of use that momentum to blow by, angling around 5 wide. So good effort from him. I think he's moving forward and improving. He will need to improve again, though, to get the better of a group like this, but I certainly think there's some upside with a horse like Central Dispatch.
Yeah, I mean, when you were going into handicap that last race at Del Mar, you would have told somebody they were crazy if they told you that Central Dispatch was going to be behind Irideo early and still win the race, but that's exactly what happened. And I just think it speaks to the versatility that Central Dispatch has. But this is now a step up in class against tougher company. That 91 buyer last time was the best he's earned to date, and I think he's going to have to run a little bit faster to beat this field, but he does pick up Flavien Prat.
Okay, David, I'm going to need your help with this one because I'm out on the West Coast. You're on the East Coast. So you're seeing all of these horses like Gaslight Dancer who are running at Aqueduct day in and day out. And Gaslight Dancer has won the last 2 races that he finished, both of them in turf sprints. And that last race came from way, way out of it. Now he'll try the downhill and he'll try Stakes Company out here in Santa Anita. But this was a visually pretty impressive performance.
Yeah, there he is, way out in the center of the turf course, running this field down as they were just spread all across the course late in this Aqueduct season, going the 6 furlongs, and he's able to nail Live High, Live Low on the wire. A 3-year-old who has been improving for trainer George Weaver, who was coming off a good effort against Stakes Company. Look, Gaslight Dancer is stepping up against tougher here, and he's going to have to improve again. But this horse has been in really strong form lately for Rick Dutcher, and I think running better than the results would indicate in a few of his races. There was a pretty significant rail bias on September 15th. And the one race that made me doubt whether there actually was a bias was Gaslight Dancer's victory, because he just sat out there 3 to 4 wide on the turn and still mowed down the speed that finished a clear second that day. So Gaslight Dancer is clearly thriving at the moment. And Rick Dutcher also has been thriving in New York. If you've been paying attention to Aqueduct, he's winning at somewhere close to a 50% clip over the past couple months. So I think he's sending a horse out there that might be in tip-top shape.
And while a couple of the top contenders in here are very good and they're capable of running very good races, like we said with Motorious or a horse like an Air Force Red, but kind of after that, I think the rest of the field, there's a lot of question marks about the rest of them right now. And then you can look at a horse like Gaslight Dancer, may be able to offer you some value. He was one of the horses who I had a tougher read on for in this race, but seeing your endorsement, I'll upgrade him a little bit as well. As we move to Sorrento Sky to round out the field, thought really no excuses last time out. Got a pretty good trip, got a great opening on the inside, made an early move to the lead, might have just moved a little too soon, but ended up getting run down by Unconquerable Keen. Again, that was at 5 furlongs, but if you look 2 starts back, Sorrento Sky was winning down the hill, going 6.5 furlongs, and does have a couple victories at the 6.5 furlongs distance.
Yeah, I guess my concern with him is that he's drawn the rail in each of his last couple starts and got these great ground-saving trips. Now he's out in post 9, so he might have to work a little bit harder or get hung out wide. We'll see how that works. Sometimes it's not that big of a deal down the hill post position, but he is a horse that's in good form right now. Another runner, one of 3 from the Phil D'Amato barn, who seems to be coming into this race in very strong form. Just think he's stepping up against slightly tougher.
David, let's take a look at the selections for this one. Who do you have on top in here?
I'm taking a shot with Gaslight Dancer. I'm going to let my East Coast bias come through with this one because I know that Motorious has just faced way better horses and is clearly the one to beat. But coming out of the Breeders' Cup and a good effort in the Breeders' Cup at that, I don't think he's going to slip through the cracks from a betting standpoint at all. He's going to be a very short price in this race. And Gaslight Dancer, maybe this is the time to take him when he's stepping up against tough company, because I just think his last few races have been so impressive. And he is a horse that back early in his career for Mike Maker did once hint to have this kind of talent before going off form. Maybe he's gotten back to that form for Rick Dutcher.
8-6-3-1 for David. I'll put the 1 Air Force Red on top, hoping this one can sit a pretty nice trip. Would love to see him stalking in like third or so early on in this race. 1-6-7-4 for me. We both have Motorious in the second spot as the horse to beat, but however you're playing him in the Joe Hernandez, we wish you the best of luck on Saturday at Santa Anita.